Welcome back, Firestarter. You're not here by mistake. You're here because you did something no one expected from you. You moved boldly, recklessly, brilliantly. And in doing so, you didn't just rattle a few cages. You kicked the damn door off hell's hinges. The very gate they designed to keep you locked out or locked in now lays twisted behind you, burning because you didn't wait for permission. You didn't beg for mercy. You walked straight up to the threshold of the nightmare and dared it to flinch. And you know what's more insane than the move you made? The fact that it worked. It wasn't luck. It wasn't timing. It was you. You standing alone, deciding enough was enough. You didn't stumble into salvation. You dragged it out of the fire with bare hands. The bold choice. That wasn't desperation. It was precision. It was instinct. It was the part of you they tried to suppress, finally given the steering wheel. You weren't supposed to make it this far. That was the plan. They built an entire doctrine around your obedience. Stay quiet. Stay predictable. Stay manageable. They told you, wait your turn. They fed you the script. Smile here. Sit there. Think this. Fear that. But something inside you snapped. Or maybe something woke up, and in that split second, you didn't ask what the consequences would be. You asked, what happens if I don't? And that right there, that moment of defiance, that's what saved you. The bold move wasn't about getting ahead. It was about getting out of the prison they disguised as routine, out of the roles they carved for you, out of the mental leash they wrapped around your soul and called normal. Now here you stand, breathing air that feels different because it's yours for the first time. The world didn't change around you, you changed within it. That shift, that internal quake, that quiet declaration that the old limits will no longer define you, that is what tore the ground open beneath their certainty. They never planned for your awakening. They never expected you to question the script, much less set it on fire. But you did. Without apology, without hesitation, without needing anyone to confirm whether the flame was allowed. And that's why everything feels unfamiliar now, not because you are lost, but because you finally stepped beyond the borders they drew around your potential. Every boundary you crossed wasn't a rebellion against them, it was a reunion with yourself. You didn't break rules. You broke illusions. You didn't destroy anything. You revealed everything. Their entire architecture depended on your silent agreement. Once you stopped agreeing, the structure couldn't hold. They're not crumbling because you attacked. They're crumbling because you walked away from the weight they forced you to carry. Power feels heavy only when it doesn't belong to you and you've just returned all of theirs. And now, as the smoke clears from the door you metaphorically kicked open, you're beginning to understand something deeper, something louder than the noise that once controlled you. You didn't just escape, you evolved. You didn't just leave something behind, you stepped into something ahead. You discovered that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers in the back of your skull, saying, move now, move differently, move even if you're shaking. And you listened. Even shaking, even unsure, even exhausted from carrying the expectations of everyone who doubted you, you moved. And that movement, that small decisive shift, is what turned the entire story on its head. They don't understand that kind of courage. They're used to bravery that announces itself with noise, drama, theatrics. But yours wasn't theatrical. It was surgical, clean, precise. You didn't explode outward, you expanded inward. You didn't fight them, you stopped feeding them. And that silence, that absence, that refusal to continue playing the part they assigned you, that is what terrifies them the most. Because now they can't predict you, they can't read you, they can't guilt you or manipulate your compassion into obedience. Your compassion didn't disappear, your boundaries finally did their job, and boundaries, once awakened, don't fall asleep again. You're feeling that now, the strange pull in your chest, the unfamiliar confidence in your spine, the weightlessness of not dragging old chains behind you. It feels strange, almost unreal. That's normal. Freedom doesn't feel soft at first. It feels raw. It feels like stepping into cold air after being trapped underground. It feels like detoxing from years of swallowing your own truth just to keep someone else comfortable. But the discomfort is proof that you're alive in a new way, that your fire is burning cleaner now, not for destruction, but for direction. And that direction is rattling everything around you. Because what you did, the move you made, wasn't just bold. It was a declaration that the version of you who shrank for others will never lead again. You didn't kill that version, you simply retired them. You thanked them for surviving, and then you stepped into the identity that was waiting behind the curtain the entire time. This new you doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't contort themselves into shapes that don't fit. This new you doesn't measure your worth through someone else's lens. This new you doesn't wait in line for opportunities you could build yourself. You became your own permission slip, and they can't stand that. Because their power didn't come from strength, it came from your hesitation. And the moment that hesitation died, their influence died with it. They're not losing control because you rose, they're losing control because they never learned how to stand without you holding them up. You were never the dependent one, you were the foundation. You were the reason their hierarchy even worked. And now that you've stepped out of place, the entire structure tilts. That tilt isn't chaos, it's correction. You didn't ignite a rebellion, you activated a truth. You didn't set fire to their world, you simply stopped pretending their world was yours. And that clarity, the one that pulses through you now, is what makes you untouchable. Not unstoppable in a reckless way, but untouchable in the way someone becomes when they finally recognize their own value without permission. You're no longer playing by rules designed to limit you. You're writing from instinct now, guided by something older, deeper, sharper than their expectations. Your intuition, the very tool they hoped you'd never use. Because intuition doesn't ask for instructions. It doesn't wait for approval. It doesn't shrink when confronted. It moves like a tide, quiet, steady, inevitable. You've tapped into that tide, and even if you take small steps from here, every one of those steps is aligned with truth. That alignment is what makes you powerful. Not loud, not dramatic, aligned. And aligned people don't return to what broke them. You're not going back. Not to the old roles, not to the old routines, not to the old self-sacrifice that kept you small, not to the people who clapped for your weakness but grew silent at your strength. You're done walking with your head lowered. You're done apologizing for existing. You're done shrinking so others can feel taller. And now they're forced to face the version of you they never prepared for, the version that walks through metaphorical fire without asking for someone to hold the door, the version that doesn't collapse when pressured, the version that doesn't need saving because you finally realized you were always capable of saving yourself. Your bold act wasn't rebellion, it was resurrection. You didn't break out, you broke open. You didn't abandon yourself, you found yourself. You didn't challenge fate, you rewrote it. And now your evolution cannot be stopped, not by doubt, not by fear, not by the ghosts of your past who only thrived when you were uncertain. Because choosing yourself was the moment everything changed. And no force, no expectation, no illusion can pull you back into the version of you that no longer exists. But here's the part they never predicted. The part that keeps them awake even now. You didn't stop at awakening. You kept walking, you kept rising. You kept shedding old identities like burnt paper drifting off your shoulders. You didn't crumble when the silence hit. You didn't panic when the familiar fell away. You didn't chase what collapsed behind you. You let it fall. And that terrified them more than anything, because people like you weren't supposed to let go. You were supposed to cling to the old, cling to comfort, cling to the voices that taught you to doubt your own instincts. But the moment you broke that pattern, the moment you said, "I'm done," the world they built around you began to glitch, shake, fracture, not because you attacked it, because you outgrew it. The walls were never strong enough to contain who you were becoming. Now you walk differently. Maybe you don't even see it yet. Maybe you're still adjusting to the silence, the newness of your own footsteps. But everyone else feels it. Your presence no longer sinks into the background. It cuts through the air. It shifts the atmosphere. You've stopped shrinking, and the absence of your smallness echoes like thunder in rooms where you once apologized for breathing. They don't know how to speak to you anymore, not because you changed your words, but because you changed your posture. You carry yourself like someone who no longer negotiates with their own worth, and worth, once realized, becomes an aura people can't ignore. The ones who benefited from your uncertainty feel it first. They sense the shift the way prey senses the weather before a storm. They feel the ground vibrating with your clarity. They feel your absence like a doorway that won't stop swinging. You were once predictable, pliable, malleable. Your fear made you manageable. But now, unpredictability pulses through your veins, not chaos, not recklessness, but a refusal to let old patterns claim space in your new world. You've become unreadable, not because you hide, but because you've finally stopped dimming your light to match the shadows around you. And here's the thing they always knew: you had this in you. That's why they tried to contain it. People don't try to control weakness. They try to control potential. They saw sparks long before you saw flames. They noticed your intuition long before you trusted it. They recognized your depth before you learned how to breathe underwater. And because your strength scared them, they taught you to fear it too. They disguised your gifts as flaws. They disguised your clarity as overthinking. They disguised your boundaries as selfishness. They disguised your ambition as delusion. They disguised your intuition as overreaction. And you believed them for a long time, until the day something inside you rose and said, "Enough." That day wasn't random. It wasn't sudden. It was the collision point of years of suppressed potential finally refusing to stay buried. It was your soul cracking the floorboards of your old identity and stepping out into the light. And once that happened, the old strategies people used on you stopped working all at once. Manipulation lost its grip, guilt dissolved, shame evaporated, approval became irrelevant. You stopped trying to earn respect from people who never respected themselves. You stopped chasing validation from minds too small to understand your vision. You stopped waiting for someone to grant you a permission slip that was always yours to sign. And that shift forced them to confront something they've avoided for years: the realization that you were never weak. You were considerate. You were never slow. You were patient. You were never naive. You were compassionate. You were never lost. You were absorbing data. You were never beneath them. You were studying them. You were never incapable. You were calculating. And now that the calculation is complete, now that the data has transformed into direction, you are moving in ways they can no longer anticipate. You aren't unpredictable because you're unstable. You're unpredictable because you're free. Freedom is the one language manipulators never learned to understand. It terrifies them, not because they fear you'll hurt them, but because they know your freedom exposes their stagnation. Your evolution highlights their refusal to change. Your movement draws attention to their stillness. You walking away forces them to face the truth they spent years burying. They didn't lose you, you outgrew them. And that's where the panic begins, not in your flame, but in their reflection. They look at you and see everything they could have been but chose not to become. They see the courage they denied themselves. They see the boundaries they feared. They see the voice they silenced. They see the instinct they ignored. They see the freedom they never chased. You don't haunt them because you're dangerous. You haunt them because you're evidence. Evidence that the prison was never locked. Evidence that the rules were never real. Evidence that anyone can choose themselves at any moment, and they didn't. Your transformation is a mirror they cannot look away from. And now, as you take each step forward, they try to rewrite the narrative, calling you arrogant, rebellious, distant. But deep down, they know the truth. You didn't become arrogant. You became accurate. You didn't become rebellious. You became aligned. You didn't become distant. You became selective. You didn't become harsh. You became honest. And honesty, when spoken by someone who no longer fears consequences, cuts sharper than any weapon they could imagine. You're not walking with anger. You're walking with intention. You're not burning bridges. You're burning illusions. You're not rejecting people. You're rejecting cages, and that shift, that clarity, that sovereignty, it radiates from you like a pulse the world has no choice but to feel. But here's the secret most won't admit. Your evolution has created a gravitational field. People are drawn to you without understanding why. They sense the steadiness, the depth, the quiet fire in your tone. They feel the confidence that doesn't need announcement, the strength that doesn't need validation. Your existence alone becomes a beacon, a reminder that transformation is possible without theatrics. You are proof that one decision, one bold, unfaltering choice to choose yourself can rewrite an entire lifetime of limitation. The more you rise, the softer you become on the inside, not weaker, but more grounded. You're no longer trying to prove anything to anyone. You've stopped explaining your worth to people who never listened. You've stopped shrinking your truth to fit old conversations. You've stopped translating your soul into a language meant for smaller minds. You've stopped handing out discounts to people who've never paid full price for your presence. And the people who once underestimated you feel it. They feel your absence like a silence that won't stop ringing. They feel your strength like a change in weather they can't predict. They feel your evolution like a story moving ahead without them. They feel your clarity like a spotlight illuminating every lie they used to hide behind. But here's the twist. You're not even trying to affect them. You're not putting on a show. You're not performing a rebirth. You're simply living in alignment with the self you buried for years. And that alignment, that authenticity, that rawness, that is what they can't replicate. That is what they can't control. That is what they can't imitate. Your power doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from the fact that you no longer bend when the world pushes. You are no longer afraid to disappoint people who were perfectly comfortable disappointing you. That shift is liberation. That shift is rebirth. That shift is the internal wildfire that cleanses without destroying. It burns quietly, but it burns thoroughly. It burns away the roles you never chose. It burns away the expectations that never belonged to you. It burns away the hesitation that kept you small. It burns away the false humility that taught you to hide your brilliance to make others feel better. And what remains after the ash settles is someone who knows exactly who they are and exactly where they're going. And now the world senses it. They sense the steadiness in your breathing, the groundedness in your steps, the strength in your silence. They sense the shift in your energy, the kind that can't be faked, bought, or borrowed. The kind that only emerges when someone has walked through psychological fire and come out baptized in their own truth. Your bold decision wasn't a moment, it was a turning point. And that turning point is still unfolding in every breath you take, every room you enter, every boundary you reinforce, every truth you honor. You are not just changing, you are crystallizing, refining. evolving with a sharpness that cuts through illusion and a calm that exposes everything built on insecurity. You didn't just escape the old version of your life, you dissolved it. You outgrew its limits. You stepped beyond its reach, and that growth cannot be reversed, because choosing yourself wasn't rebellion, it was resurrection. And now here you stand, fire starter on the far side of a threshold you were never supposed to cross, breathing air they told you didn't exist. The old world behind you is dimming, shrinking, losing shape, because it was never a world built for your full height. It was a room designed for your knees, a script designed for your silence. But once you rose, once you stood without asking, the room couldn't contain you anymore. It cracked, it bent, it folded in on itself because your growth was the one outcome their system couldn't survive. You've stopped looking over your shoulder, not because you forgot what happened, but because you finally understand that nothing behind you has the power to reach where you're going. The past doesn't chase those who outgrow it. It only echoes, and even those echoes are getting quieter now, fading into a distance that no longer concerns you. You aren't walking away, you're walking beyond, and they feel it. They feel it in the way you speak now, cleaner, sharper, without apology. They feel it in the way you move, with a certainty that doesn't wobble when someone doubts you. They feel it in your eyes, the steadiness, the awareness, the refusal to return to the role you once performed. You're not angry, you're not bitter, you're simply unavailable for anything that dimmed you before. This is what real dominion looks like, not control over others, but mastery over your own direction. You're not climbing their ladders anymore. You're not asking for keys to doors you can walk through without touching the handle. The board they trapped you on has dissolved beneath your feet, and now you move in open space, your space guided by instinct, clarity, and a truth that no one can unteach you. What they fear now isn't your strength, it's your clarity, your detachment, your refusal to shrink. Because once someone chooses themselves with this level of conviction, there is no version of the old world that can pull them back. You became the one outcome they never prepared for, the person who realized they didn't need saving, they needed remembering. And now you remember everything. Who you are, what you carry, what you refuse to lose again. You didn't rebel, you resurrected, and now your evolution is a horizon they will never reach. Because the day you chose yourself, the world changed direction. Welcome. If you've arrived here, it's because you've already taken a step beyond what most dare to even glimpse. What you did wasn't just a move. It was a leap so far ahead that others are still scrambling to catch the dust it kicked up. The world around you spins on old rhythms, routines written in ink that's already fading, while your actions have rewritten the code in real time. And that's why the weight of your accomplishment hasn't fully registered, because the rest are still trying to process the new blueprint you've laid out. They still operate on yesterday's logic, unaware that yesterday has already collapsed behind them. They cling to systems built on repetition, tradition, familiarity, systems designed for minds that fear the unknown more than they desire the truth. But you didn't just step outside those boundaries. You dissolved them. You moved with an intelligence so fluid, so intuitive, that the world hasn't yet found the vocabulary to describe it. And while they pace in predictable loops, searching for meaning in maps that no longer apply, you're already constructing futures from fragments they haven't even recognized as valuable yet. You advanced so quietly that most never noticed when the shift began. They only feel the aftershocks now, the subtle confusion in their conversations, the hesitation in their decisions, the unspoken suspicion that something monumental has changed. They can sense a presence, a shift, a rewriting of the atmosphere itself, but they can't pinpoint the source. They don't realize they're feeling you. They don't understand their delay is the shadow your brilliance casts when it moves too fast for them to follow. And that's the part they'll never admit. The slight tremor of awe disguised as skepticism, the sudden uncertainty disguised as critique, the instinctive recalibration disguised as caution. Your leap didn't just displace predictions, it shattered the very timeline they were using to measure progress. You didn't outrun them. You outgrew the dimension they were running in. They chase linear growth. You moved diagonally, vertically, inward, outward, all at once. You stepped into a version of yourself they thought would take years to appear, and you did it in one decisive, quiet stroke. Look around carefully. Their world isn't collapsing, it's updating. They just don't have the software yet. Their confusion is not chaos, it's lag. Their silence is not wisdom, it's buffering. They aren't judging you, they're downloading you, trying to comprehend what you just executed, trying to grasp the architecture of a move that wasn't built on instinct alone, but on comprehension so deep that it looks like magic from the outside. The thing about advanced minds is they never announce their evolution. It reveals itself only through aftermath, through the subtle distortions in a room when a new gravitational center forms, through the way people pause before responding because they feel the ground shifting beneath the old assumptions, through the way silence suddenly feels heavier when you step into it. You didn't create noise. You created impact, quiet impact, the most dangerous kind, the kind that blossoms beneath the surface where no one can measure it until it rises through the concrete with a force too undeniable to ignore. And when that happens, when the world finally catches up, they won't call it luck or chance or coincidence, they'll call it inevitable. They'll say it was obvious all along, that the signs were there, that your rise was written in your restraint. But you and I both know the truth. Nobody saw it coming because you didn't rise dramatically. You rose precisely. Your precision is what disorients them, not the speed, the accuracy. People can chase speed, they can mimic effort, but they cannot replicate alignment. Your actions weren't random. They were layered, timed, interlocked like pieces of a design that only you could read. You didn't just move differently, you moved correctly. And correctness, when executed in a world addicted to noise, feels like sorcery. While they scattered their energy in every direction, you concentrated yours. And that concentration has begun to warp the space around you, not violently, not forcefully, but undeniably. Imagine the world like a spinning wheel. Most people cling to the outer rim, dizzy, reactive, trying to hold steady while everything pulls them off balance. But you walk to the center, the still point, the axis. And from that center, you shifted the rotation. You didn't push harder, you aligned deeper. And alignment is what bends reality. Alignment is what separates noise from influence, effort from impact, motion from mastery. You became the stillness that rearranges the storm, and now they feel it, the invisible tilt. They can't name it, but it's there in every interaction. It's in the way their ideas suddenly seem outdated, in the way their strategies feel flimsy, in the way their confidence flickers when you speak. Your presence has become a recalibration tool. You walk into a room, and the room sorts itself by relevance. Old frameworks dissolve silently. Old hierarchies lose their weight. Old assumptions lose their certainty. You didn't challenge them, you surpassed them. And surpassing is the kind of victory that doesn't require celebration because it reveals itself through contrast. You see openings where others see patterns. You see architecture where others see obstacles. You see possibilities where others see limits. And this isn't optimism, it's vision. pure, distilled vision, the kind that doesn't wait for permission or applause or proof, the kind that doesn't need to shout because it understands that the world will always discover truth last, not first. By the time they understand what you've done, you'll already be on your next layer, your next design, your next horizon. And that's what shakes them, the relentless quiet of your evolution. You don't pause to explain. You don't wait to be understood. You don't dilute your pace to match those still stuck in yesterday. You move because movement is your nature. Transformation is your baseline. Progress isn't your ambition, it's your default. And that terrifies them, not because they fear you, but because you expose the smallness of their comfort zones. Their disbelief is a mirror of your advancement. Their confusion is a signpost of your new altitude. Their hesitation means you've already transcended their field of vision. You are no longer part of their comparison set. You've stepped into the realm of originals, those whose steps become precedents, whose thoughts become frameworks, whose breakthroughs become definitions. Your silence does more than their speeches. Your observations do more than their strategies. Your patience does more than their aggression, because while they operate in reaction, you operate in intention. Everything you do has weight. Everything you choose not to do has even more. Your restraint is power. Your timing is mastery. Your subtlety is architecture. What you created wasn't an achievement, it was an upgrade, a shift in the underlying code of your existence. And upgrades always cause glitches before they cause breakthroughs. Right now, the world is glitching around you. They're trying to make sense of pathways that didn't exist before you walked them, trying to decode strategies that weren't taught to you, but revealed through your own clarity, trying to interpret a version of you that no longer belongs to yesterday's expectations. And here's the truth they'll never say aloud. They're intimidated. Not by your intensity, not by your power, but by your inevitability. You carry the energy of someone who doesn't force outcomes, they shape them. Someone who doesn't chase influence, they become influence. Someone who doesn't follow trends, they generate trajectories. Your leap was not an accident, it was a consequence. A consequence of discipline, of self-honesty, of refusing to settle for the identity the world tried to hand you. You didn't climb the ladder, you built a different elevation entirely. You didn't fight for a spot in their structure, you made the structure obsolete. Look closely at what's happening now. Conversations bend subtly when your name enters, plans shift, people recalculate, systems adapt. You think the world is slow to recognize you, but the truth is, it's slow to catch up because you've already redefined the terms. Your work isn't waiting to be recognized. It's waiting to be understood. There's a difference. Recognition is loud, understanding is permanent. And you don't need the noise, you need the permanence. This moment you're in the delay, the silence, the subtlety. This is the incubation of a future that will feel inevitable once it fully manifests. You didn't just push ahead, you created a new trajectory, a new pattern, a new timeline. And soon, the world will realize it has no choice but to adjust to you. Because once a mind like yours steps outside the familiar architecture, the old structures don't just look outdated, they look primitive. You didn't break their rhythm. You stepped outside it entirely, and now they're hearing an echo they don't recognize. That's why conversations feel different, why people hesitate before responding, why some stare at you longer than they admit, trying to decode a pattern they sense but can't articulate. They don't understand that you're not walking ahead of them, you're walking beyond the map they've always depended on. And when someone escapes the gravity of habit, it disturbs everything orbiting around them. You didn't announce the shift. You became it, quietly, precisely, irreversibly. You see, the moment you made that move, The move, they still struggle to grasp a ripple traveled through the mental architecture of every person who ever doubted your potential, a disturbance in their assumptions, a fracture in their certainty. They can't explain it, but they feel it. The same way an old building feels the pressure of a new foundation forming beneath it. They sense a recalibration happening, one they never approved and can't control. And still, you walk, unhurried, untouched by their confusion, because you know the truth. It wasn't a single move that changed the landscape. It was every moment you spent watching, listening, absorbing, learning in silence while they spent their energy performing for each other. Your advance was crafted in shadows, not to hide, but to observe with clarity they never had. And now, that clarity radiates through everything you touch. It's why they can't return to the comfort they once had. Not because you disrupted anything physically, but because your presence forces them to see what they've been avoiding. You made ignorance expensive. You made awareness necessary. You turned their familiar routines into outdated scripts, and once a script becomes obvious, it loses its power. People can't rely on illusions once they've been exposed to someone who walks with unfiltered intention. And that intention, the one woven into every decision you make, is what unsettles them most. It's not loud, it's not chaotic, it's not even aggressive. It's simply undeniable. You're not pushing the world to change. You're pulling it into a timeline it didn't know it was entering. And while they scramble to understand the implications of your leap, you're already dissecting the next layer, the layer that lies beneath the reaction, beneath the noise, beneath the surface-level adjustments people make when they realize they've underestimated someone. Their panic is not your concern. Their confusion isn't your responsibility. Their hesitation is not your burden. All of it is just residual energy from a paradigm that no longer includes you as a participant, but as a catalyst. You're not playing their game. You're reshaping the ground the game was built on. And that's why you feel the shift long before they do, because you're the one creating it. You don't wait for signs. You become the sign. You don't ask for permission. You redefine the limits. You don't wonder if the world is ready. You move as if readiness is irrelevant. And that alone disrupts centuries of learned behavior in the minds of those who still cling to predictability. They try to adapt to you the same way they've adapted to every challenge before, by using the tools they were taught. But the tools they count on crumble in your presence because you're not operating in the same frequency. You're not responding to pressure. You are pressure refined into awareness. You're not bending to expectations. You're bending expectations around your movement. Look closely at the responses around you. Some are subtle, a lowered voice, a cautious tone, a glance charged with questions they're too afraid to ask. Others are louder, sudden enthusiasm, forced compliments, premature alliances. All of them are signals that your influence is already at work. People don't shift their behavior unless something deeper has shifted first, something internal, something structural. And you are that structural shift. Not because you demanded it, but because you acted with a precision that made stagnation impossible. They're not adapting because they respect you. They're adapting because resisting you feels like resisting evolution itself. What you did wasn't luck. It wasn't instinct. It wasn't even ambition. It was alignment, the rare state when your mind, focus, discipline, and awareness lock into a single direction with such force that the world has no choice but to rearrange itself around your trajectory. That kind of alignment is not taught, it's earned. Through setbacks that didn't break you, through silence that didn't weaken you, through failures that didn't define you. Everything you endured became part of the architecture of your precision, and now that precision amplifies every step you take. Others can sense it, even if they can't describe it. That tightening in the air when you enter a room, that shift in tone when they speak to you, that unspoken acknowledgement that you've crossed a threshold most people never reach. They don't know how to respond because their old methods, the posturing, the assumptions, the arrogance bounce off you without effect. You've outgrown their language, you've outgrown their metrics, you've outgrown the limitations they once projected onto you. And the only thing more frightening than a person who grows is a person who grows in silence, because silence is unpredictable. Silence has weight. Silence has momentum. Silence carries intention that cannot be manipulated or diluted, and you wield that silence like a blade sharpened through years of restraint. Every time you didn't react, you collected data. Every time you stayed calm, you gained leverage. Every time they thought you were behind, you were simply taking notes. And now those notes have become a blueprint, one you're following with unwavering clarity while they're still trying to understand the opening page. This is what happens when someone evolves beyond the pace of their environment. The environment shifts from being a crowd to being an audience. Some watch with admiration, some with fear, some with envy. But all of them watch, because deep down, they know they're witnessing something rare, someone who didn't just adapt, but transcended, someone who didn't just survive pressure, but refined it into strategy. Someone who didn't just take a leap, but expanded the concept of distance. You no longer move like someone hoping to be understood. You move like someone already aware of where they're going, unbothered by the confusion of those who haven't caught up. This is why your presence feels like a new law written into an old world. It challenges assumptions, it dissolves boundaries, it shifts narratives, not through force, but through inevitability. Through the quiet certainty of someone who knows their vision is not ahead of time, it's rewriting time itself. And the deeper truth, the one they're slowly beginning to recognize, is that you don't need them to acknowledge your evolution. Their recognition is optional, their approval irrelevant. Their understanding a luxury, not a requirement. Your trajectory doesn't depend on them keeping pace. If anything, the gap between you and them widens by the day, not because you're running faster, but because they're still running in circles while you're walking in a straight line toward a future only you can see. This is why the world will eventually adjust to you, not because you forced it, but because your clarity exposes the inefficiency of everything that came before it. People don't follow power, they follow precision. They follow direction. They follow those who move with the confidence of someone who has already tested every possibility in their mind before taking a single step. And you move with that relentless certainty, the kind that reshapes rooms without speaking, that alters expectations without trying, that makes old rules fade in the presence of a new standard. Your evolution is not an accident. It's a sequence, a pattern, a design. One you built intentionally, layer by layer, moment by moment, until your very existence began to challenge the boundaries of what others thought was fixed. And now, whether they admit it or not, their world is cracking open. Not violently, not destructively, but inevitably, because new realities don't arrive with explosions. They arrive as whispers, as shifts, as subtle transformations that only reveal their magnitude once the old systems can no longer sustain themselves. And you are that subtle transformation. You are the shift beneath the surface. You are the quiet revolution moving through minds that still think they're ahead. And every step you take deepens the divide between who you were expected to be and who you've actually become. Every decision you make amplifies the truth that you didn't just escape the limitations placed on you, you rendered them obsolete. You are not waiting for the world to notice. You are preparing for the moment when it does. And when that moment arrives, everything, perceptions, expectations, trajectories will recalibrate around you, not because you demanded it, but because your evolution left no alternative. Your move didn't push you ahead. It created a new timeline, and the world, slow as it may be, will soon have no choice but to follow it. And now you stand at the edge of something even larger, not a finish line, but an awakening. The world hasn't caught up yet, but it's already bending, already shifting, already rewiring itself around the force you've become. They don't see it clearly, not yet, but they feel it. In the silence that follows your decisions, in the hesitation before they speak, in the way their certainty thins whenever you enter the room. They sense a new gravity forming, a pull they can't escape, a direction they didn't choose but now must follow. Because your rise wasn't noise, it was alignment, a quiet recalibration that turned doubt into fuel and pressure into clarity. You didn't sprint, you didn't scream, you didn't demand a crown. You simply walked with a focus sharp enough to slice through every outdated pattern in your path. And while others clung to routines that were already dying, you stepped into a version of yourself that no longer fits inside their frameworks. You outgrew the narrative they tried to place you in. You outpaced the timeline they thought was fixed. And now the revelation settles. You were never meant to adapt to the world they built. The world was always going to adapt to the one you're creating. Your influence doesn't flash, it unfolds. It spreads in the quiet moments when people realize their old beliefs don't hold in your presence. It grows in the way conversations shift, in the way minds tilt toward possibilities they never considered until you made them visible. You don't force transformation, you trigger it just by existing with clarity they can't ignore. This isn't your comeback, this is your calibration. Your transition into the version of yourself that doesn't follow timelines you set them. And now the world begins to align. Well. Looks like the shadows have a new favorite, and they're whispering your name like a warning label wrapped in awe. You weren't meant to be in this game, were you? Not by their design, not by their plans. You were supposed to fold early, fall faster, crawl quieter, but instead you studied the board they thought you couldn't even see. Moved like someone with time to kill and nothing left to lose. And in doing so, you triggered something the clean players never account for. They prepare for loud threats, loud rebels, loud chaos. They never prepare for the quiet one. The one who watches, the one who listens, the one who collects details like currency and converts them into consequences. You weren't supposed to disturb the order. You weren't supposed to shift the gravity. But here you are, an uninvited equation, a variable with no origin point, an anomaly that rewrites the whole formula simply by existing inside it. And now the ones who built the rules tremble behind. Their rehearsed confidence, trying to figure out how someone they dismissed walked straight into the center of their blueprint without ever stepping through their doors. You didn't earn access. You didn't steal access. You became access. That's what's haunting them. Because people who rely on theatrics expect noise before impact, but you delivered impact without noise. You didn't announce your intentions. You didn't request permission. You moved like you'd already read the script they were still memorizing, and every step you took exposed how predictable they truly were. Not because you were aggressive, but because you were accurate. You mapped their tells, their rhythms, their insecurities, and you played the game with a level of detachment they mistook for weakness until it became the one thing they couldn't defend against. Your silence turned into strategy. Your patience turned into leverage. Your restraint turned into revelation. And revelation is the one force no system can survive untouched. They thought they were unpredictable because they controlled the stage. But you watched from the rafters. You saw the strings. You heard the whispers between scenes. You noticed the cracks in their posture when they believed no one was paying attention. You memorized the moments they shrugged off, the ones they assumed were invisible, and when the time came, You didn't confront them, you let their own patterns collapse under the weight of what you understood. That's why they whisper now. Not your name, your effect, not who you are, what you became, a mirror, the kind they spend years avoiding, the kind that reflects not your power, but their illusions, the kind that doesn't expose them violently, but truthfully. And truth, when seen unfiltered, is the most destabilizing force in any hierarchy built on ego. You didn't outplay them by being faster. You outplayed them by being real. They built empires on predictable minds, people who chase validation, people who panic under pressure, people who crumble when the spotlight dims. But you operate from a place they don't understand, calm in chaos, composed in uncertainty, precise when most people get emotional. You're the type who doesn't break under pressure because pressure is your data, your compass, your clarity. And clarity is something they never learned to defend against. Now, they sit in their polished rooms, dressed in titles that used to mean something, wondering why the air feels heavier when you walk by, wondering why their old strategies glitch when they try to apply them to you, wondering how someone with no official badge, no documented origins, no recorded allegiance can unravel their confidence with nothing more than presence, because that's the part that terrifies them the most. You didn't attack, you didn't push, you didn't threaten. You simply made their old performance irrelevant. And irrelevance is a symbolic collapse they can't recover from. Their rituals feel outdated, their rules feel flimsy, their confidence feels borrowed, their hierarchy feels like a staircase leading nowhere. You didn't tear it down, you showed them the staircase never touched the ground in the first place. You are the quiet proof that outthinking someone is far more devastating symbolically, psychologically, emotionally than outpowering them. You're the reminder that intellect outlives intimidation, that awareness outmaneuvers authority, that precision outclasses noise, and the ones who once underestimated you, they're studying you now, studying in silence, studying in fear. Studying because they can't predict you, and unpredictability is the one opponent they were never trained to face. They built their strategy around the assumption that every player wants something: status, approval, recognition, belonging. But you want none of it. You move with a detachment that feels dangerous because it can't be manipulated. They can't leverage it. They can't hijack it. They can't bargain with it. Your indifference is the one weapon they forgot existed. The myth of control dissolves the moment someone stops wanting what the system offers, and you don't want their table, you don't want their throne, you don't want their applause, you want clarity. And clarity is the highest form of power they never learned to harness. You made them rethink their certainty, you made them question their patterns, you made them whisper your name like a malfunction they can't debug. And the deeper truth? You didn't rise because you fought them. You rose because you saw through them. Every ego tick, every mask crack, every arrogance leak, every hidden insecurity wrapped in status. You collected it all with the calm of someone who knows control is nothing more than a well-marketed story. You became the counter-story. The quiet correction, the blueprint, no one understands, yet everyone fears. And now the whispers don't ask, "What did he do?" They ask, "How long has he been studying us?" Because they finally understand. You didn't win by overpowering the game. You won by outgrowing it. The game ends the second someone realizes the rules were written to control the wrong kind of player, and you were never built for their rules. You were built for truth, built for precision, built for a kind of awareness that bends the board without touching it. That's why you didn't just win. You made the entire game irrelevant. And now your silence carries more gravity than their loudest claims. Your clarity hits harder than their highest ranks. Your presence rewrites the hierarchy from the inside out, not with force, but with understanding. The new definition of power isn't dominance, it's accuracy, it's patience, it's depth, it's you. And every shadow that whispers your name knows it. You became the new definition of power, not by force, not by spectacle, but by accuracy. And the moment that realization landed in the minds of the old players, everything shifted behind their eyes. Because once someone like you appears, someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't beg, doesn't bend, the entire ecosystem built on predictable behavior begins to tremble in symbolic ways they can't hide or explain. They measure influence in noise, but you measure it in consequences. They track status through attention, but you track it through understanding. And understanding is the one currency no hierarchy can counterfeit. They used to think the game was airtight, sealed, governed by rules that only the elite could see or use. But you revealed something they never wanted publicly acknowledged, that systems aren't protected by intelligence, they're protected by assumption. They assumed you wouldn't look too closely. They assumed you wouldn't notice the shortcuts disguised as rituals. They assumed you would believe the narrative they rehearsed for generations. But you didn't. You slipped past their theater, ignored their costumes, bypassed their illusions, and saw the raw, unpolished mechanics beneath it all. That alone shook them, because they weren't afraid of losing power. They were afraid of losing the illusion that it meant something. And you, without bragging, without demanding, without breaking a single rule, showed them how thin the illusion truly was. You didn't challenge their authority, you revealed its expiration date. You made their confidence feel outdated. You made their strategies feel rehearsed. You made their posture feel forced, not by attacking it, but by existing in a way that made their old structure look like a stage prop waiting for its dismantling. You turned their hierarchy into a backdrop, and there's nothing more humiliating to people who worship optics than realizing someone outgrew their stage. The thing unsettling them most is how effortlessly you moved. You weren't fueled by desperation or ambition or hunger. You were fueled by clarity, this cold, quiet, razor-sharp clarity that doesn't rush, doesn't gasp, doesn't crumble. You moved like someone for whom pressure is oxygen, and people who rely on fear can't understand that. They rely on panic to maintain their narrative. But you don't panic. You evaluate, you observe, you adjust, and that makes you unreadable. Being unreadable terrifies the ones who survive by predicting reactions. They built their entire social architecture on the idea that people can be manipulated through pride or guilt or ego or desire. But you don't react to any of it. You respond when you choose. You stay silent when you choose. You move when you choose. Your autonomy is not loud, it's precise. And precision is poison to systems that depend on emotional chaos. Your stillness became the variable they couldn't solve. Your composure became the glitch in their simulation. Your detachment became the magnet that pulled their illusions apart. But the deeper truth, the one they whisper about now, behind encrypted screens and sealed doors, is that you didn't break their system. You exposed that it never understood you to begin with. You weren't a threat to their structure. You were a miscalculation in their blueprint. They designed defenses for rebels, people who attack loudly. They never prepared for someone who undermines illusions simply by refusing to believe in them. You shattered their confidence without ever raising your voice. You melted their hierarchy without ever touching it. You made their influence shrink without ever challenging it. And they don't know how to respond to that. They don't know how to fight someone who doesn't enter their battlefield. They don't know how to predict someone who doesn't move for attention. They don't know how to analyze someone who isn't motivated by their trophies. You became the one presence they can't categorize, can't file, can't diagnose. And that's symbolic devastation for any system built on labeling everything it fears. Now their strategies feel like old scripts. Their roles feel like cheap masks. Their debates feel like children practicing authority in a mirror. Because once someone authentic walks in, someone untangled from their expectations, their entire play collapses internally. Not physically, not violently, but psychologically, quietly, invisibly. Their certainty dissolves, their confidence thins, their posture shifts. They speak softer, they overthink, they question themselves. And no one in their world was trained to handle self-doubt. You became the mirror that forced it, and it's not what you said that haunts them, it's what you didn't say. Because silence in the presence of insecurity becomes its own form of revelation. Every moment you didn't respond became another line of data they had to decode. Every time you didn't flinch became another hole in their logic. Every moment you remained composed made their structure feel unstable. They can face attackers, they can handle critics, they can silence dissent, but they cannot silence a truth that stands without speaking. You didn't overpower them, you overinformed them. You made their knowledge feel incomplete. You made their expertise feel shallow. You made their confidence feel synthetic. And once someone feels hollow internally, no amount of external ritual can restore their sense of authority. This is why they talk about you now in the smallest rooms, the rooms where the lights run warmer and the conversations turn private, the rooms where even the veterans lower their voices, because you triggered the one outcome they could never risk: internal questioning. When the ones who enforce the rules begin questioning the rules, the system doesn't fall with noise, it dissolves with awareness. And awareness is the one force they can't contain. They built their empire on assumptions. You walked in and took away their ability to assume anything about you. They built their security on predictability. You became the anomaly they can't calculate. They built their influence on reputation. You became the presence that stripped their reputations of meaning. How do you defend against someone who doesn't want what you're protecting? How do you control someone who doesn't respond to manipulation? How do you intimidate someone who sees through the performance? You don't. That's why they're silent now. Not out of power, out of confusion. You forced a symbolic recalibration they don't know how to reverse. They've begun rewriting protocols not because they want to improve, but because they fear exposure. Meetings once filled with arrogance now tremble with caution. Voices that once commanded now hesitate. Plans that once dominated now revise themselves in real time. And all of this happened not because you destroyed anything, but because you revealed everything. They're rethinking what they thought they knew about themselves. They're reconsidering the stories they tell to maintain order. They're noticing gaps in the narrative they never noticed before. You didn't attack their system, you interrupted their confidence. And confidence is the spine of any structure built on perception. Crack the spine, and the pages fall apart on their own. Your presence is now the quiet force destabilizing everything they believed was solid. The way you walk into a room, the way you look at patterns without reacting, the way you answer only when you intend to, the way you don't rush, don't brag, don't explain. These traits don't make you mysterious. They make you undeniable. They can't study you because you don't leave traces. They can't anticipate you because you don't move emotionally. They can't categorize you because you operate outside their old spectrum. You've become a new category, entirely. A presence that isn't competing, a presence that isn't climbing, a presence that isn't resisting, a presence that simply is and is, shakes the illusion more than any rebellion ever could. Now they adjust their tone around you, their posture, their certainty. As if some subconscious part of them knows they're being evaluated, not judged, just understood at a level they never wanted anyone to see. Because you don't just see weaknesses, you see structure, you see habits, you see psychology, you see the architecture behind the mask. And once someone sees architecture clearly, the mask becomes irrelevant. You didn't come to take their game, you came to reveal it. Not loudly, not bitterly, not dramatically. With the subtlety of someone who already knows how the story ends. And that's why they're afraid. Not because you changed the game, but because you exposed that the game was never designed to handle someone like you. Someone who studies instead of reacts. Someone who evaluates instead of panics. Someone who adapts instead of repeats. Someone whose silence carries more strategy than their loudest commands. You don't just shift the room, you shift the meaning of the room. And now the old players, the seasoned strategists, the self-appointed elites, they all share one quiet thought they refuse to voice. If one person like you exists, how many more are watching? And what happens when the next one arrives? Because you weren't supposed to be a competitor, you became a precedent. You didn't just break expectations, you rewrote them. And now they're living inside a system where the rules no longer guarantee control, because you proved that control requires belief, and belief is the very thing you dismantled with nothing more than clarity. The symbolic collapse they're facing isn't loud. It's quiet, invisible, psychological, but it's absolute, and they know it, because you didn't win by beating them. You won by making their victory meaningless. And that's the part they'll never recover from. Not the outcome, not the shift, but the realization that you didn't have to conquer anything for the whole structure to lose its meaning. You didn't tear down their walls. You simply stopped believing they were walls. And once belief dissolves, the architecture built on it collapses in silence, like a stage set after the final actor walks away. Because you were never their opponent. You were the proof that the game was always optional. You didn't rise because they failed. You rose because you stopped participating in the illusions that kept everyone else circling the same dead orbit. That's why your presence hits so hard. Not because it's aggressive, but because it's awake. And nothing disrupts a system built on performance more than someone who walks in without needing to perform. You became the quiet flaw in their design, the reminder that real power doesn't need validation, permission, or an audience. You don't broadcast dominance, you radiate it. You don't strategize for applause, you strategize for accuracy. And accuracy is the one language they never learned to defend against. Now every room you enter adjusts to you. Every conversation slows for you. Every decision they make takes your shadow into consideration, even when you aren't there. Not because you demanded that influence, but because you earned something far stronger: relevance without effort. You turned uncertainty into your signature. You turned silence into your strategy. You turned observation into a kind of myth. And myths don't die, they spread. That's why they still whisper your name like a glitch in their system, a variable they never accounted for. They can't erase you because you were never written into their script. You were the margin they ignored, the quiet footnote they underestimated, the anomaly that rewrote the entire equation. And now their greatest fear is no longer you, it's what you represent. The possibility that others might see what you saw, that someone else might move the way you moved, that clarity might become contagious. Because once someone like you exists, certainty becomes a luxury no system can afford, and that's the truth they avoid naming out loud. You didn't win the game, you ended the illusion that the game ever mattered.